So today we are looking at a very interesting topic that I think most people can relate to. Breakups, and why are they so challenging and so emotionally draining? So Quinton and I have both gone through that heart-wrenching experience of having your heart ripped out and to pieces and not knowing how you're going to get up and move on again. But let's see. We're going to look at why is that the case and what can we do to stand up from them. So, Quinton, why are breakups so difficult?
Breakups, it's so difficult because you already invested your heart into this relationship. And part of it, you created a fantasy. By going into a relationship, you already have a fantasy. You already have an idea of the relationship. And you're already you're already in the fantasy, you already build the future. And then the first thing of a breakup, there's shock. And now that shock, it's like you can't believe you didn't expect this relationship to end.
Okay, so it's literally like a glass shattering moment.
Yes, definitely.
That picture that you had is now shattered.
And now that shock, you need to deal with these emotions. And I mean, any shock automatically goes into denial. It's like, it cannot be. I think of when someone passes away, it's like that shock. And automatically you're going to, this can't be true. And that's exactly what is experiencing in a relationship after a breakup as well.
I think it's a very important point you're making. When you're going through a breakup, you're actually going through a loss. And if we think about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's grief cycle, shock is the very first thing that hits you. And then you go into denial and bargaining and anger and depression. And the thing is, it's not all in that order. I don't think I've even put it in the right order now, but you cycle through these emotions or these stages, sometimes all in one day when you go through this.
You can go from one extreme to another extreme. You can go into acceptance to shock, you know. So now I have shock and now suddenly I accept it. So a person needs to be so gentle of yourself going through a grief process, going through that loss, because emotionally it's quite taxing.
We must not underestimate the impact that a loss has. So you've lost the picture of what you think the relationship. You've lost the person. The person is not there anymore. You're not waking up with them next to you anymore. They're gone. But at the same time, and you've lost the future image that you had about how you would grow old together, what you would still do together, places that you would visit, things that you would do, children that you might have, all those fantasies, like you say. But have you not also lost the person that you are in relation to that relationship? I've seen so many people that have been with somebody for a long time and then going through a divorce, suddenly finding, but who am I? Who am I without this person? I recall a good friend of mine was actually going into a complete panic after a divorce, standing in a shop, needing to decide on the color of towels that she wants. And she had a complete breakdown, realizing that she doesn't know what's her favorite color. She doesn't know what she likes. So you lose a bit of yourself.
Most definitely. I think you also lose a part of your own identity, because a part of your identity is also hooked inside the relationship and what a relationship entails. And in this relationship, there's certain habits, there's certain patterns, there's certain things we do together, you know, and to lose all of that, it's like you need to rebuild your life. And I think in that moment, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's lots of fear. So where there's fear, there's automatically a lot of uncertainty. And then that is many times linked to the shock and the denial phase as well.
And if we look at the shock and denial, I remember when I had decided to end a relationship. Although the person that are dumped, the one that receives the news of being broken up with, that's the first shock. You know, obviously you don't go into a relationship expecting it to end. So obviously that person experiences shock often. They don't see it coming. But what I experienced when I decided to end a relationship was that it hit me as well, that for a long time I could feel that this relationship was struggling and that it wasn't aligning with me and with what I want for my life. But I kept denying that. I think it's that interplay with the denial and the shock. I was denying that. I was trying to make it work. You work at relationships.
Yes.
So the day that I decided, or that I realized that it's actually over, was a big shock. And I can still remember that day so clearly when I phoned my sister and I said to her, it's over. Nothing particularly extreme happened. It was just, like you said, accepted that reality, and then that shock kicked in and I needed to action it. And what was very evident for me in that scenario is that I had gone through this cycle of denial and frustration and bargain and anger and trying to make this relationship work until I got to a point where I realized it's not going to work and I pulled the plug. But for my poor partner, the minute that we broke up, that cycle only started for him. He was then in shock, and he then went through denial, and he then went through bargaining, trying to bargain me back into the relationship and into the anger and into the depression, where I looked like I moved on. I looked like I was happy, and he actually said years later that he felt like I didn't value the relationship because it looked like I was happy to be moving on and happy to be free and single. And he felt like was 5 years just nothing.
That happens quite often.
Yeah.
Because you already went through a cycle. You already were in bargaining. Before you broke up, you already bargained, like you've mentioned. But you also already went through depression.
Yes.
And the depression is many times quite a challenging phase to go into because you can't communicate that with your partner.
Exactly.
Because you're actually feeling depressed about, is it going to work? Is it not going to work?
100%.
So before you're actually going into that acceptance and making that final decision. So it takes quite a lot of guts to say, it's not going to work.
You're so right. I remember that depression time because I actually fell ill for 2 weeks in bed. And I was writing morning pages, a very, very helpful exercise, just to get my head around this relationship and if it's going to work or if it's not going to work. And it was very sad. I was crying because I was grappling with this. And like you rightly said, I couldn't share that with my partner. So it was sad for me when he said he thought I didn't value it. And we had a very nice conversation years later to say that it's not the case. It was an absolute beautiful relationship for what it was meant to be. But yes, you're so right. I almost want to say to our listeners, if you have been the one that's been dumped and it looks like the other person is just happily moving on, don't let that fool you. If they the one that broke up with you, they probably went through this cycle in silence and by themselves, torturing themselves many times before without you even knowing. So, but Quinton, in your clients, how do you see this denial and anger play out?
Automatically, after a person has been dumped, usually anger is one of the predominant emotions that comes up. Because with that, there comes resentment. I've put in such a lot of energy into this relationship. And the thing of resentment is that resentment always happens because we don't actually resolve the conflict. So all of the conflict which hasn't been resolved, all the unresolved stuff in a relationship, all of that stuff automatically comes to the surface. And that is where anger then comes in. So now they're angry at you, and they're angry at themselves, they're angry at the relationship, they're angry to be dumped. And that creates many times emotional roller coaster where they experience this up, this down. Now I hate them. Now I love them. Now I miss them. And then the bargaining also starts. Could I maybe have done something different? Can I maybe still do something different? Maybe we must go to therapy. Maybe I should have given them more attention. So many times what the challenge is, now you start looking for the fault within yourself.
Okay.
And now that can also become a bit of self-punishment.
And adjustment. I've seen people where, okay, he likes a more social person and I'm actually quite a quiet, introverted person. But because my partner wants me to be that, now I'm the butterfly. Now I'm the social butterfly. Now I push myself to be who I'm not.
Most definitely. But automatically what also happens, the inner critic resurface. And now they're starting to believe certain things about themselves. Maybe I'm not good enough. I'm maybe not outgoing enough, etc. And many times that inner critic phase is what takes them into the depression phase as well. But the depression phase is very important because we needed the depression because the word depression says depressed. Something is actually pressing me down. But the word also says deep rest.
Oh,
so many times in depression, there's a sense of deep rest. There's a sense of isolation. There's a sense of withdrawal. But it's a very important stage because in that moment, you're actually reflecting. You're actually looking at yourself. You're looking more objectively at the situation. Even though it feels if the situation is pressing you down, you truly deal with what is. And if you can deal with what is, then you can actually go into acceptance. Where you say, okay, I can see the situation from a much more whole, holistic perspective. And I can have a different opinion. I can see my fault. I can see their fault. It's much more objective. Now I can actually make peace with what is.
So what you are saying is that pizza box, dirty clothes, haven't showered for 3 days phase that we always see in the movies is actually quite important. You can shower, but you have to give yourself that downtime. You have to give yourself that alone time, that you and the pizza box. And don't be too hard on yourself in that time if you don't have the healthy eating habits but
it is a very important time. The challenge is we think that is only what depression means. But depression is such a huge concept because different people express things differently. And the same way, depression also gets expressed in a different way.
Yeah.
So some people is going to go to overworking, or they're going to find a way to numb out. They're going to drink more. They're going to party more. The challenge of that phase, if you numb out or suppress it, you still don't deal with what is. So you much longer stay there, and you stay stuck there, and you can even get trapped there. You don't go into acceptance. And that is many times why we see people actually 5 years, 10 years down the line still mourning their relationship.
Yeah, mourning a loss.
Mourning the loss.
Because they're stuck in that depression, that valley of despair, as it's called. It's very normal. It's a human experience, and it's part of this cycle. So it's not to avoid it, but it's to not get stuck there. That is the key thing. You have to face that reality through a quiet contemplation. But to your point, if you try and avoid that, you're actually keeping yourself stuck in the most challenging phase of all of it.
Yes.
So
and that is many times the source of addiction. Because in the depression phase actually requires you to feel. Because what you give yourself permission to feel, you also give yourself permission to heal. If you numb out and you escape, you never give yourself the ability and the capacity to feel. And many times, if you don't have the capacity to feel, now other challenges in your life is also going to happen. Now, if you can't deal with this, then you can't deal with other things as well. Now, not only this scenario becomes overwhelming, your whole life becomes overwhelming. And that is many times why people get stuck in depression as a mental health disorder in its essence.
So how do you break through? how do you get to acceptance? If acceptance is where the light shines and out of the dark valley of despair, how do you break through to that light?
First of all, you need to deal with what is. You need to accept. But with acceptance comes awareness. I need to become aware of my role I played in it. Because what people do, people get stuck in depression because they also get stuck in, I'm the victim, poor me, how can this happen to me? And now the whole thought pattern becomes negative. So therefore, they totally get trapped in that negativity. And the more they go into the negativity, they spiral down and down. And the deeper you spiral, the harder it becomes to see the light. So you need to become aware of your thoughts, aware of your patterns. What is my patterns I had in the relationship? What is the role I played? Because we can't always blame the other person, because blame never creates empowerment. I still see people who blames Adam and Eve.
For being alive.
Or the apple. Something gets blamed, but it doesn't get you anywhere. You need to take a sense of accountability, because that is when you actually take your power back and say, this I can change. I can't change the past. I can't change what happened. I can't change their choices, their behavior. But I can take accountability for what is mine. And that is the first step. You actually start looking in a different direction. Because how your psyche works, what you focus on expands. So if you're going to focus on the past and the relationship,
and being done in by, and the victim that's being dumped.
So what you focus on is going to expand. Yes. I always say to people, it's like looking in the rear mirror and
trying to drive forward.
But you're focusing on the back. So you can't go forward by focusing on the past. You need to accept what is in order to move forward. And that is one of the most important steps. Absolutely. And what I've also noticed is once you take action, it's like you just do something. And it's a small step, but it's a small step in another direction.
The right direction.
And once you take that step, it's like the next step appears, and then the next step appears. And then if you look down, I'm in a whole different direction. But if many people do, they get stuck in that depression and they don't want to take the next step because they want to see just the perfect picture, which they need to create, and they only can create it by taking that relevant steps. So they so attach to a whole picture, but the picture is not whole. You need to make it whole. Therefore, you need to take accountability. You need to take action step by step.
And baby steps. So even if the picture isn't perfect, even if it is messy, the image I have from listening to you, it's almost like you give one step forward and life reaches out and pulls you a little bit further up the slippery slope. And you give one step and life pulls you a little bit further up. And eventually, before you know it, you're out of the ditch. You're out on the field, sunshine and flowers and happiness again.
The healing journey can never be lazy. And all the support is there. I've always seen, if you're looking for support and help, you'll find it. There's therapists, there's friends, there's free therapy. The moment you put yourself out there, it's available.
Yes.
So you just need to have willingness to do the work.
So what I'm hearing you say is you have to take the first step. So for our listeners out there, if you are currently in the valley of despair, or maybe toggling between anger and bargaining and depression and struggling with acceptance, maybe it's just to sit down quietly and actually reflect and take that downtime with a notebook and reflect on what was this relationship about? How did I show up in this relationship? What was done to me? Where have I felt like the victim? But what was my contribution to that situation as well? And the breakthrough could be as simple as just a decision to give yourself that time. And secondly, take action, whether it is to take the downtime and reflect, or whether it is to decide that tomorrow you will go and walk around the block and take a shower and eat healthy food and The day after, you will connect with friends again. But start by giving yourself time and space to grieve, to feel the loss, to mourn. It's very human, and it's very much part of the breakup process.
And the resistance to deal with the pain just keeps you in the pain. So give yourself permission to feel and to go through that process.
Yeah.
Because in the end result is worth it. And every choice has a consequence.
Well, Quinton, thank you for sharing your wisdom today and the wealth of experience that you have dealing with clients with depressions and going through this. And if you like and found value in what we shared today, subscribe to our channel and look out for upcoming webinars about smart relationships.
Thank you so much for joining.